Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. The webinar will begin shortly and we'll discuss the local dimensions of the nationally determined contributions. This is a webinar hosted by the International Solar Energy Society. We're looking forward to all of your participation and questions in the Q&A session later. Before we begin with the webinar presentations, I would just like to inform you about what ISIS is and stands for. The International Solar Energy Society is a nonprofit UN-accredited membership NGO. The ISIS vision is to achieve 100% renewable energy for all, used efficiently and wisely. We represent a diverse membership of academics, researchers, energy practitioners, consultants, students, businesses, and advocates. ISIS works together with like-minded organizations from countries around the world to advance the renewable energy transformation. By becoming a member of ISIS, you are supporting the 100% renewable energy movement. We understand that sometimes the time of webinar may not suit people in many parts of the world, different time zones. While we do try to alternate webinar times to suit as many of these time zones as possible, it is not always possible. Therefore, we will post a recording of this webinar on the ISIS website and on the ISIS YouTube channel. You are welcome and encouraged to ask questions at any time through the webinar. To ask a question, just select the questions pane on your screen and type in your question. Please specify who your question is directed to, and the questions will be addressed after all the presentations have concluded in a Q&A session. We'd also like to encourage you to use the ISIS discussion forum on LinkedIn to continue the Q&A and the discussion even after the webinar has ended. I would now like to hand it over to the webinar moderator, Arthur Hinch, coordinator of the Global 100% Renewable Energy Platform, who will take you through the agenda, introduce the speakers, and also moderate the Q&A session. I hope you all enjoy the webinar, and with that, I'll turn it over to you, Arthur.
Yes, thank you very much, John. As John has already kindly introduced me, my name is Arthur Hinch. I'm the coordinator of the Global 100% Renewable Energy Platform. Before I will start by introducing the speakers for today, I would like to give you a brief background about how and why this webinar came to be and what the general framework is. First of all, let me introduce to you the Global 100% Renewable Energy Platform, short Global 100% RE. It is an international, actually a global initiative of like-minded organizations from different sectors, including NGOs, including research organizations, including organizations working with local governments, by combining the voices and the respective expertise of all of these different organizations, we hope to push on a global level towards achieving 100% renewable energy. And actually, the International Solar Energy Society, which is kindly hosting today's webinar, is also one of the founding members of Global 100% RE. Now, for the background to this particular webinar, this webinar is based on a successful forum which has been carried out by Global 100% RE in cooperation with the German Environment Agency on 9 November in the Environment Ministry in Bonn, in Germany, during COP23. And the topic of this forum was the same as the webinar, the local dimension of the NDCs, 100% renewable energy. And the idea behind the forum was to break down silos and encourage the dialogue between local governments and national governments and national governments when it comes to revising the NDCs, but particularly when it comes to escalating the 100% renewable energy movement that can be seen all over the world and is very pronounced on the local level. During the forum, we have had speakers and participants come together from 27 countries, talk about different aspects of how this can be achieved, and what the barriers for increased cooperation and dialogue between national and local governments with regards to the NDCs and 100% renewable energy are. And the outcome of the forum was that the cooperation and the dialogue between the different government levels with regard to 100% renewable energy should increasingly take place. And it is very, very important to have adequate frameworks in place that enable good cooperation between the different local government levels, so that action or action of the different levels can be mutually supportive. Global 100% renewable energy platform has as one of its main focal points a map that shows initiatives on the local level, on the national level, initiatives from organizations around the issue of 100% renewable energy. And we see that all around the world, this issue and initiatives that showcase that this is actually possible are happening on a very large scale. And we see it as our main mandate to make sure that this can be very communicated in a very effective way, and that together with all of our member organizations, but also together with all of stakeholders from all over the world, we can together push for achieving this goal. So without further ado, let me introduce today's distinguished speakers in the order of speaking. First of all, we have Ms. Soledad Aquilar. Soledad is an international expert in environmental law, and she is the National Director of Climate Change in the Ministry of Environment of Argentina. She has very, very profound experience in the field of international environmental law and policy, and has been at more than 50 multilateral negotiation meetings on this topic. Then the next speaker will be Mr. Christoph Wolfsacker. Christoph is a program manager at the Climate and Energy Fund of the Austrian government, and is also heavily engaged in actually making sure that this dialogue, this cooperation, this support between the different government levels can take place. Christoph has also very much experience in the field of renewable energy and international cooperation. Following Christoph, we have Nuri Palmada. Nuri Palmada is a member of the governing board of Som Energia, which is a renewable energy cooperative in Spain. Nuri has extensive experience in the field of citizen-based renewable energy projects, extensive experience with anything really that comes when it comes down to local renewable energy. And she has much experience with the very practical side of how these kind of local and citizens-based, cooperative-based renewable energy projects can actually be taken into the future. Unfortunately, not able to join us today due to connection issues is Godfrey Baluku Kime. He's the mayor of Kasese, a city in Uganda, and he has been, or he is actually a very pronounced supporter of 100% renewable energy. He is the mayor of the city of Kasese, and he was very keen on also sharing his experience. Unfortunately, not able to join us. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the microphone to Soledad for her presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. Let me see if I can share my screen. Sorry. Can you see my screen? Hello, can you see my screen? I guess you can. Otherwise, let me know. Well, I'm Soledad Aguilar. I'm the National Director for Climate Change in Argentina. And I wanted to share with you the work that we're doing in translating our NDC into concrete actions at the national and subnational level, and how we are working also with the our provinces and local communities. So right after the Paris Agreement was signed in 2015, it coincided with our change of government, and one of the first ideas that we submitted to the new authorities was that we needed to have a national cabinet on climate change to be able to implement the NDC that had just been presented in concrete actions on the ground. So fortunately, this idea was taken quite quickly, and in 2016, the National Cabinet on Climate Change was created. It first was integrated by 14 ministries, and eventually 3 more asked to come in. So now we have 17 ministries that participate. Ministers meet 2 times or 3 times a year, and the rest of the year we work in roundtables with designated focal points by each of the ministries. So our first task was we wanted each of the ministries to have their part of their NDC, to revise it, to see what the measures that were proposed to be included, and to adjust them to the priorities of the new government and to the National Development Plan. So this work was done during 2016, and I don't know if you share the whole screen. Let me do it like that. So during the year 2016, we revised the contribution, and this has, on the one hand, we arrived at a contribution that was higher than the one we had before in terms of more ambitious, but also mostly each of the ministries took ownership of the measures that were included and that had to do with their jurisdiction. So we arrived at a target, and we decided to present the target as an absolute target. So not in terms of how much we're saving, but in terms of how much we will emit. We think that is a more concrete measure that allows for more efficient and transparent accounting. So our target is not to exceed 483 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by the year 2030. And we also calculated additional measures which would be conditional to the existing of funding and technology. So we have additional measures that would allow us to continue increasing our ambition as far as we are able to access this technology and funding. We work with, like I was saying, with sectoral tables. So during 2017, the work we did, and this is where we started incorporating much more strongly the work at the provincial and municipal level, is that with these measures that had been calculated and had some assumptions and some numbers and sort of a percentage of incorporation into the energy matrix of the different activities, we had to translate them into a concrete plan for implementation of those measures. So we work on the different tables, and we managed to finish 3 plans by the end of the year, the one on energy, one on forest, and one on transport, and together the 3 plans represent 97% of our contribution. So it's basically the whole national contribution. So what we did was to these measures that had been calculated, we started designing a roadmap for each of the measures, including what are the barriers to this measure for its implementation, what are the instruments that one needs at the national, provincial, or municipal level to adopt in order for these measures to work, what is financing that is needed or the financing that is already being invested for these measures. And we identified or started to identify criteria and indicators for monitoring the advance of this measure, the results on one side and also the performance of the measure. So for each of there are almost 40 measures in total, and for each of them we constructed a plan, a roadmap, And this same exercise that was done at the national level with the National Cabinet on Climate Change was replicated in the 24 provinces, and through what we have is already an established institution, which is COFEMA, that is the National Council for Climate Change, where all the ministers of environment of the different provinces are represented. So through the COFEMA Commission on Climate Change, we met during the year and we repeated the exercise with the provinces also presenting their own measures for mitigation, some of which are included and some of which are additional to what we are calculating. All this exercise took the whole year, and our idea is next year we need to finish 3 more sectoral plans that are underway for industry, for agriculture and livestock, and for infrastructure and land. They don't represent that much in terms of reductions, but we want to complete our whole NDC, and in particular, the one on infrastructure and land does represent an important part of our adaptation component of our NDC. And together, when we finish all these sectoral plans, the idea is to adopt a national mitigation plan and a national adaptation plan, which would be a summary of this sort of bottom-up approach that we are using. And eventually, in 2019, a national climate change response plan that we expect, or we hope to be able to pass through a law, so that it would give certainty in the long term for the implementation of all of these measures. This is some example of the work that we did during the year. We do, besides the ministers meet 3 times a year, but we also have 2 meetings a year with wide participation of civil society. Down here is our Minister of Environment, Rabbi Sergio Bergman, presenting the work of the National Climate Change Cabinet, and we work also in smaller groups to evaluate each of the measures and to prioritize which are more important, and also to identify co-benefits for each of the measures. This represents, well, this is on the right, left, you have our country, and as part of the work during this year, we also divided our national inventory by province in order for each of the provinces to have the information they needed also to design their own measures. So we managed to geo-reference 92% of our inventory, which was a very high according to our expectations. It exceeded our expectations. We thought we wouldn't be able to split it to that level, but we managed to be able to do so. So as you see, the different provinces have very different energy matrix. The ones in the south, it's mostly energy emissions matrix. I mean, the ones in the south is mostly energy that causes the emissions. The ones in the north, so you see a lot of green, has to do with livestock and deforestation. So they have mostly emissions that come from agriculture. So this shows why this exercise is interesting, because then the measures have to be adapted to each of their realities. We also worked on the forest plan, working with the 5 different forest types that we have in Argentina. We did workshops with them. 335 people participated. So these 2, we were going to the provinces to do the inventories on one side, the capacity building on inventories, and on the other side on forests. And this is the example of a roadmap for one measure in particular. This is the measure of electricity generation from renewables connected to the grid. So we have our main target, which is 20% renewable energy by 2030, and an additional 5% that we are quite convinced that we will be able to achieve. And this represents, from our NDC, it represents 17% of the energy sector's NDC. And so here is, like I say, we identify the barriers, the instrument, the financing, the monitoring, And as part of this consultation process, we can see that this measure in particular was had the #1 priority from the 13 measures that were evaluated by civil society. So this is just a summary of the results of the consultations. And also, as you see, related entities means the provinces, municipalities, and other NGOs that are working on this same measure. So in general, we don't add them because they are part of what is already calculated, but we adhere them to the measure so that when we deal in the National Cabinet on climate change with this measure, we already know who we need to invite, because we would invite all the provinces and municipalities that have manifested that they are working on this topic. This is another work that we prepared for the National Cabinet, and it's on a national climate risk map system. So what we did is, this is information that came from a third national contribution to climate change that we present to the UNFCCC. So it's information that we had on paper, on Excel tables, but what we did was translate them into a map, which is much more interesting for people to use. And here, what you can do, it's online, and you can combine the threats of climate change that are identified and come from the models, like increase in temperature, increase in heat waves, changes in weather patterns, in precipitation patterns. So you can choose out of a list the different threats. And on the other map, you have the vulnerabilities. Right now, we have mostly social vulnerability uploaded, but next year we will work on putting also the infrastructure, the planned infrastructure in the map. So you choose the social vulnerability, and then you click on the middle, and a map combining both comes up. So, and it's at the departmental level. So then you can zoom in, and this is very useful for local authorities because, for example, this map here that I'm showing combines tropical nights, which is the very hot nights, with a social vulnerability, and it's very clear that we should work on the north of Argentina and the northeast of Argentina, specifically on issues, for example, preventing old people from dying with heat waves. So it allows to be able to focus adaptation work on the most vulnerable local communities. This is all online, so anyone can use it, and you can play and choose. There's multiple combinations that are possible, and we are very happy with this result for this year, and we're more excited about next year when we're going to start putting the infrastructure, because that will also be very useful for planning for the future. And okay, this is just the covers of our 3 national plans that we finished this year, that are, like I say, the pathway to implement our national contribution on climate change. And so this is all. Thank you very much, and I'm back to Arthur. I think if you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Soledad. It's, again, just as in the forum, very great to see that in Argentina, this framework for engaging the provincial levels, local levels in this process is already quite advanced. I look very much forward to seeing how this develops in the future, and how also other countries, other national governments, also other local governments, and other countries can learn from this. So thank you, Soledad. So with this, I would like to hand the microphone to Christoph, who will talk about the situation in Austria. The floor is yours.
So hello, everybody. Good afternoon from Vienna. I hope you can hear me as well. I'm just trying to prepare my presentation, and I hope you can see it. Well, I'm happy to join you here. My name is Christoph Wolfsecker, and I'm representing the Climate and Energy Fund of the Austrian government. The Climate and Energy Fund is a national organization that aims to reduce greenhouse gases in Austria by implementing and managing national greenhouse gas programs. To start with, I would like to give you a brief climate and energy introduction of Austria. Just jumping to this map here. Austria is a relatively small landlocked country with a mostly alpine climate. Interestingly, the temperature rise is much higher than in the global average when we talk about climate change. Already now, climate warming is at 2 degrees compared to a 1 degree global warming average. Some of the impacts so far are there's severe weather events like floodings. There's in the mountain areas, especially a melting permafrost that is causing unstable mountain areas like rockfalls and landslides. We have an agricultural sector that is severely affected by droughts in the summertime. And we have a forestry sector that is threatened. You need to know that Austria is covered by forests with about 50%, and the dominant tree is the spruce, and the spruce is having a hard time managing the temperature rises at the moment. So there's severe losses in spruce areas. And of course, there's the winter tourism sector that is affected by the reduced snow cover, the seasonal snow cover. This is one of the typical snow cannons, and it became one of the symbols of climate change in Austria, especially now in the pre-season. There are 10,000 of them, probably more than 20,000 running in order to be able to guarantee a constant snow cover for millions of winter tourists to come. Without them, the whole industry would face severe losses already due to a considerably reduced skiing season. Around 60% of the ski areas are covered at the moment with artificial snow. This is just to show you a dimension of the impacts we are facing in some industries. But what about the greenhouse gas emissions? On this slide, you can see the development of the greenhouse gas emissions over the last 25 years. You can see the level of 1990, and you can see the level of 2015. There's a peak at around 2005, and then the greenhouse gas emissions reduced a bit again. You can see as well that compared to 1990, we're pretty much at the same level in 2015. So the bad news is the emissions are now more or less the same, and many other countries had a much greater success in reducing the emissions. But the good news is the per capita emissions are relatively low compared to other industrialized countries. If we compare ourselves to Germany, for example, where our GDP, the Austrian GDP is about 10% higher compared to Germany. Solar and wind sector. Just to summarize, here's some other facts about the energy sector in Austria. As I said, there's around 70% renewable electricity. The average in Europe is at around 29% at the moment. When we look at the total energy sector, we have 33% renewable energy. The average in Europe is at 17%. From a climate perspective, unfortunately, we have relatively low energy prices, especially when we look at the electricity prices and the transport gas prices. There's no nuclear energy in Austria, and the main focus of the measures should be at the moment in the transport sector, which is a severe problem because the emissions rose compared to 1990 by 60%. And the building sector, where 30 to 40% of all the energy use is going to. So this is the two sectors the main focus is at the moment in Austria. Just one number I would like to share. At the moment, 1.5% of all vehicle registrations are from electric vehicles. This seems like a quite low number, but nevertheless, it is the highest number in the European Union when it comes to electric vehicles. Of course, there's countries like Norway where it is more than 25% as far as I know. But within the European Union, this is the highest number. And we are focusing quite a lot on electric vehicles because due to a relatively high share of renewables, the impact on the transport sector when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions can be quite high. But now I would like to present an approach that is quite unique and promising, we hope at least, to tackle greenhouse gas emissions in Austria. The program is called Climate and Energy Model Regions. Like in many other countries, we were very much focused on a top-down approach. This means we had national targets, there were a lot of subsidies, there's almost no technology which is not subsidized in Austria, and there's a lot of regulations. And don't get me wrong, it is good to have these top-down measures, but probably we need more. Because it was quite obvious that these top-down measures alone didn't work. As a sole strategy, it didn't seem to be working perfectly. So consciously, we wanted to create a bottom-up movement that helps these top-down measures to succeed. So the main difference between a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach is that the bottom-up approach, you ask what projects can you create on the basis of your local and regional potentials. On the other hand, at the top-down approach, you basically tell the people more or less what to do. At the bottom-up approach, you ask them what is within their potentials, what they can do. So a little bit to the history of that program. Back in 2009, we invited some obviously successful energy regions. This was regions where we could see that more projects were happening than in other regions. So we asked them the simple question, why is it that in your region there's more projects happening than in other regions? The first answer was quite clear. They said, well, we analyzed our situation and then we wrote it down into a strategy based on this analysis, and we had this energy plan. And then we answered, well, there's so many energy concepts out there, consultants, universities, municipalities, the government, and nevertheless, there's not enough happening. So why is this different now? Then they answered, well, there's a second thing. You need a person that is in charge to implement the plan. That's all. And this person needs time and resources. And if it's only one person at the beginning, fine, it's better than nothing. So based on this information, which was at the end not that complicated, first you need a plan and a concept, and secondly, you need somebody at place with a mandate to really implement that plan, we created a program. On this map, you see Austria, and the green areas are now our 91 climate and energy model regions. It is representing as well 811 municipalities, and 2.3 million people live in this area, which is about 50% of the rural population in Austria. So how in detail is the program working? First of all, as we said, we're asking the regions to write an energy and implementation plan. What is a region? A region shouldn't be bigger than 60,000 inhabitants, we said, because it's important that this model region manager, the person at place, should be still known in the area, should be able to work in the network of this area. And we learned that regions bigger than 60,000 inhabitants, then it would be difficult to do that. So when this energy plan is written, they need to come up with 10 concrete actions how they want to tackle greenhouse gas emissions in this area. We don't tell them at all what these actions should be. They need to come up with these actions. These actions need to be based on the strength, on the potentials of the region. And then the role of this model region manager is to really initiate and coordinate these actions, these measures, and to bring it to the ground. He needs to bring this concept on the table again, save it from being left in the drawer, and really implement those things. At the end, we also have some additional measures for these regions. 2 or 3 times a year, we gather all those 91 regions and educate them on specific issues, and we also try to form a network. There's also exclusive investment subsidies that are only available for those regions, that are not available for other parts of Austria. They have access to other fundings and programs that are not available for the rest of Austria. And we also implemented a quality management basis. Here you can see the 91 agents, these 91 model region managers that exchange successful projects and inspire each other. It's always projects that need somebody at place to initiate and coordinate, and we hope we can build up this network in the future, and also that we can share this experience to other countries who work on a similar issue. Well, I'm at the end of my presentation. If there's any questions, I think there is place at the end of the other presentations, and I'm looking forward to discussing with you. Bye.
Yes, thank you very much, Christoph, for your presentation. Also, in your case, very, very great to see that this is functioning in such a well manner, and that also, particularly with regard to the financing aspect, that these things are very clearly communicated, and that it is really up to the different regions and the different stakeholders to come up to you and respond to that in a good manner, and to make it as effective as possible. So thank you, Christoph. So without further ado, I would like to give the microphone to Nuri, who will talk about the situation in Spain, and particularly about the role of citizens and cooperative ways of renewable energy deployment. And Nuri, the floor is yours.
Hello. Yes, we are Som Energia. We are a res cooperative. So we are not a government, but I think it's interesting because we are a kind of citizenship self-management. So it's not government, but it's yes, an alternative. Yeah. So I will try to explain who we are and what is a res cooperative. Yes, Som Energia, we are 7 years old, so we are young. And at that point, we already have 40,000 members. Who we are? Yes, we are a, sorry, one moment, I want to, yeah, here. Som Energia, we are a non-profit cooperative, it's consumption cooperative, and we also are a supplier. Now we have 60,000 electricity supplier contracts, and we want to, yes, to promote a change in the energy model, especially in Spain, that we think is not one of the best ones in Europe. Yes, you know, Spain, yes, the legal frame for renewables is really very bad. We think it's one of the worst in all Europe. Yeah, and what we do, really, we are a social movement of people. We want to change this energy system. We want to get rid of the oligopoly. In Spain, there are few companies very powerful that they have, yes, they have a lot of power and they control all the electricity movement, electricity system. Yes, and we want to put the citizens in the center of the energy transition. So we are doing this by two different ways. One is generating a clear demand for renewable energy. We sell 100% green electricity to our members. We obtain the GDOs, no? The GDOs of the existing plants. But we want to increase the production of renewable energy. We want to have our own plants and to reach the production of 100% of our own electricity. We want to produce 100% of the electricity all the members we are consuming. Yes. Our goal is this, no, to reach 100% production with our own plants. It's very important. The concept in renewable cooperative is the ownership, because we are the owners of these plants. We think this is very important because we can reach a model in the future, maybe 100% renewable, but we want to put this question, no? Who is the owner of this electricity? We think on energy democracy and on energy sovereignty. We think this is very important. Also, we want to promote through our members self-production. Not all our members can do this, because in Spain, the majority of the people, they live in flats, rented flats, and they cannot make individual self-production. And also we want to, yes, to promote efficiency. Yes, in self-production, we want to facilitate all the members. We are doing like collective buying. Yes, buying, for instance, now we are doing maybe 100 members. They will make individual self-production installation at their homes, and we will negotiate this collectively in order to get better prices. But another interesting thing is that we are developing collective self-production systems like this generation kilowatt hour. You have this here. In that case, it's like a big plan, and all the members who want to participate in this collective self-catering, I like to explain this like this self-catering system, self-energy, electricity self-catering system. They make an investment related to their consumption, and they can use the rest of 25 years, during 25 years, the electricity at the cost price of the plant. It's like a PPA, no? We are doing like a power purchase agreement between our own members at 25 years and at cost price. This is this generation kilowatt hour project. Yes, we also have our own renewable generation projects. We have photovoltaics in rooftop, we have biogas, we have small hydro, we have this big plant. Now we are building this, at the beginning of this 2018, we will build four photovoltaics plants, maybe 5 megawatts in total we'll have. Yes, this system generation kilowatt hour is our virtual collective self-consumption project. Yes, we have a web. You can look to the web. There is some videos in YouTube also explaining this in English. And it's every participant decides to invest in energy actions. The minimum is only 100 euros, so it's open participation. This is another very important thing in cooperative. one is ownership of the plants, and the other thing is open participation. Everyone can participate on this kind of cooperatives. Yes, because the minimum is only 100 euros. So with all the money, in that case, in our case, there are 3,000 members who has participated in this system, and we already have almost 3 million euros. So we promote these new renewable energy projects, and then this is like a loan that the member does to the cooperative. This loan will be returned in 25 years at zero interest, but as a member, you can use electricity at cost price, and you save in your electricity bill. Yes, this is an example of the kind of projects we are doing. Is this scale 2 megawatts, 3, 4, maybe as maximum within 5 megawatts. This is the kind of projects we are looking for. And now the next projects we are doing, it's yes, in total, these 3 projects in total is 5 megawatts PV in total. And I would like to share with you an interesting thing is that we as a cooperative, till now, we are financing our projects 100% from our members. So we don't go to the banks to look for money. And it's the member, the assembly, every year who decides the interest of the money. No, so last month we did an emission of 5 million euros, and in 1 week, only 1 week, we get 5 million euros from our members. So now we already have the money to make those projects. So yeah, thank you, and I will answer all the questions.
Okay, thank you, Nuri, very much for sharing this very, very good example of how on the local level, cooperative-based renewable energy initiatives can work and do actually work very, very well all over the world. And it's very interesting to see how there is, globally speaking, a huge proliferation of citizens-based and community energy-based renewable energy initiatives all around the world, and stakeholders actually actively engaging in the exchange of information and knowledge on how this can be done within the different contexts and jurisdictions. So I believe this have been the presentations, which of course, as we have promised in the beginning, what will now follow is the Q&A session. I will be going through I will be doing this focused very much on the questions that we have received in the questions box. And perhaps first, if Nuri, since you were already speaking, perhaps I can start with you. Could I ask you to again quickly elaborate a little bit on the role of the national government in this case? How did you perceive the Spanish national government engaged in this? And how does your energy cooperative work within that framework?
Yeah, in our case, the thing is the national government is not engaged on this, really. You know that in Spain, since 2012, there is no feed-in tariff for renewables, not at all. So if you want to make a new project, you have to go to sell to the pool, and the pool, the electricity market pool is really, yes, unpredictable in Spain. So it's very difficult now to make new renewable projects, because banks cannot, they never want, yes, to give you a loan or something like that. And the last 2 years, Spain has done some tenders, but those tenders are made for the big ones, because we as a small, yes, as a cooperative, our projects are smaller, and yes, we don't have facility to all the territory, because people is participating on that, and you don't have the NIMBY effect on renewables. Yeah, also those tenders are marginalist, so when you bid, it's not paid as bid, it's marginalist. And what happens is the big ones, the big projects went to the tender and they offer zero. So the result in all the tenders has been zero. So the projects, yes, they have win the tender, but win nothing, because the subsidy, the feed-in tariff is zero, nothing. So it's really, it's difficult now. Yes, in Spain, it seems that photovoltaic, you know, the price are lower, is very low now. And we have a lot of sun. And yes, there are some very big plants, maybe 500 megawatts plant in the south of Spain, but those plants will be in the hands of the big ones also. I think it's more interesting to make a distribution electricity system with a smaller plants and facilitate this. So I think it should be yes, a planning for this, because in the tender you don't have any territorial planning, you don't have any technology planning, only is the price, only is the cost.
requirement within citizens that actually engage with your energy cooperative. So the question is, how do you develop trust, knowledge, and leadership within such a diverse group, and with such a diverse group, obviously?
Yeah, that's the key. That's the key point to develop the trust. But can you imagine that we have 40,000 members? Do you know how many engineers we have? I don't know, but so many. So yes, and this is so there is a lot of knowledge between us, but this is important, especially in the beginning when you start a cooperative like this. It's clear that now we are in the working team. We are already 40 people. So we are like another kind of company. We are a supplier. We have to do the same things the other suppliers are doing, and with our plans. So we are professional. It's the same. I think, yes, as a company, because yes, we are a cooperative, is a social enterprise, but we are also yes, we are a business, a social business. So we are professionals, but we have 40,000 members. Between them, we have a lot of acknowledgement, a lot. I don't know if I, yes, if it's enough.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for this very detailed answer. I think this definitely shows that, in this very diverse group and this very large group, there is so much knowledge that, that people are also eager and willing to share some of this knowledge, and that when they engage in renewable energy cooperative projects, that they do so, well, first and foremost, or one of the primary reasons, simply because they believe it's the right thing to do, and also, of course, it has financial, very huge benefits. So thank you, Nuri. I would like to use this as a sort of starting point, and now move more towards the question for nations, crisp a need for actually more pressure from local.
We do feel the of local. They have signed up a commit neutral. The movement is climate change department. Our main interest right now is not so much on putting numbers and targets, but on actually seeing how much can we implement on the ground and how fast. This is what our colleague was just saying from Spain is very interesting, because you can build huge policies, but if you don't have the basic requirements for the policy to work, then it's very complicated if you're going back and forth with renewables policy. So we are more, and personally, I am more interested in having a very concrete policy that goes step by step, always moving forward. So right now, our target is 25% by 2050, by 2030. I'm sure we could do more, but there's infrastructure requirements that are that need to be constructed because in their ground. So the discussion on ambition, we think ambition right now, and we should focus on trying to achieve our targets. And in that respect, pressure of governments is very important, but the commitment and the activities is a motor for more action at the national level.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. You showed in your presentation stakeholders have in creation of on how to
the important we do universities but they need to represent a larger group in around or practical work in smaller groups, and so they are associated with specific measures. And that works very well, because then when we have a meeting in the National Cabinet to deal with these measures, we invite those that are associated with the measure. So maybe it's 5 or 10 people, so it's not such large groups. So by the end of the process, the NGOs and the civil society groups that are working speaking of course, the final word also is by the relevant ministries. It's not even implementing the measures, so we need them to be convinced about what they're doing. But up to now, the input from civil society has been a big motor and a very useful, also for us, a mechanism to validate for example, the roadmaps, because there are certain barriers that the private sector knows that we don't know, or certain instruments that are being used in a province and we don't know. So it has been extremely useful. But my suggestion is it has to be from the start, and also there has to be some sort of agreement between those participating that if they are participating in drafting something new, it should not be publicized before it's finished. So we have this agreement, and up to now we are very happy that it has been respected by everyone involved, because it would be very complicated if we share with the civil society participants a specific instrument that is not yet finished, and this comes out in the press. So these sort of things can sort of jeopardize the whole participation process. And up to now, everybody has been very responsible, in the sense that we've opened the discussion from the very first drafts, but in the understanding that these are drafts and that they need polishing and that they are not ready for publication. So that would be my suggestion in terms of how to structure it. And then, of course, we use, depending on the specific topic to discuss, we use different mechanisms for participation. For example, when it's right now, it's the plan is finished, it's a huge draft, it has maybe 50 pages, so we cannot make a small exercise. We just send them the whole draft with a survey for making comments line by line. But when we were working on the previous, more preliminary versions that we were working measure by measure, it was more fun, because we could do these workshops where we prioritized one over the other, and we identified co-benefits, and it was more, let's say, more lively in terms of interchange of experiences. I hope this clarifies a little bit.
Yes, thank you very much, Soledad, for this very elaborate answer, and I think it's very clarifying, definitely. So thank you very much. I would now give the microphone to you, Christoph, raising the same question. Everything you're doing, do you perceive a need for more pressure from the local levels or the regional levels to the national governments to raise ambitions on NDCs in general or renewable energy?
Of course, I mean, pressure always helps to get things moving. But I would maybe come back to the question about the key barriers as well, and between the different political levels. And when you look at Austria, there's quite a few levels. You have the European Union, you have the national government, then we have quite strong federal states, and at the bottom we have the municipalities. And I would say each of those levels is very eager to do something. And when you ask about the barriers, why things don't work as they should work, maybe there is a lack of understanding really competences and the mandates of these different levels. I'm not sure if this is always very clear, and some level is waiting for the other to get things doing, especially here in our country. When I look at the municipality level, where we work a lot, I think we have to distinguish between two different kinds of projects. On the one hand, there is the infrastructure projects. This is projects that cost a lot. This is renewable energy projects. This is the grids. This is the storage system. This is the whole refurbishment building sector. Of course, when you go in the municipality board with those kinds of projects, you need to have a very strong politician to argue that it's important to shift the funds into those directions and maybe take the funds from other important sectors. This is a very, very tricky political discussion. But on the other hand, then there is many projects that don't cost anything. But there isn't a market either. Just to name, for example, we're working a lot with the reduction of traffic, of transport. This is quite low-hanging fruits, but there's nobody really lobbying or arguing for it. And there you need really, like the model regional managers we have, you need somebody at place who has the mandate to argue for that. There's no lobby, there's no market to earn something with it. There's not much pressure from that side. So that pressure from that part is important, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Christoph, there's also been a question or a request to you to elaborate a little bit more about the plan for the electric vehicles. To what extent what is the timeline of this plan, and to what extent does it engage multiple stakeholders in the process?
Well, we started in I think it was 2009 when we came up with electric vehicle model regions, what we called it back then as well, where we picked 7 regions in Austria where quite some money was running into. We tried to create a relatively high concentration of vehicles. We had around 2,000 vehicles in those regions. And then we had some learnings from those regions, especially about the infrastructure and about the service of those vehicles and all those kind of things. And when we finished this program 3 years ago, we made the next step, that we went into a subsidy system by financing private and company vehicles. And this is budgeted for another 2 or 3 years. And the political statement from our Minister of Transport was that by 2030, there should be no more sales of combustion engines. So this is the plan until 2030, that electric vehicles should be the predominant mode of transport. But knowing very well that this is not the only measure we can take in the transport system, just exchanging electric vehicles or combustion cars by electric vehicles, there needs to be many more things. We also have to put efforts in the energy system, because the energy demand will grow, the electricity demand will grow by the electric vehicles. And at the moment, our electricity system is not covering fully our domestic consumption. So we need to import quite some energy from Germany. So there needs to be effort, and also our public transport system needs to be improved quite a lot. Yeah, but at the moment we had elections in Austria. Our government is changing, and we don't know how the policy will be with the new government in that area, but also in many other areas. It's quite open at the moment how things will develop. But it is, as I said before, it is an advantage in Austria that we have quite a high share of renewables already in the electricity mix, and that the impact is quite high. When we shift to electric vehicles, it's much lower in many other countries in Europe. So the discussion is about that.
Thank you very much. Continuing, Christoph, with you just a little bit more. So a general question that pops up quite frequently actually is that often when local governments engage with the national government in sort of supporting framework for escalating or for accelerating their local climate or renewable energy action, one particular factor that always comes up is sort of red tape, is bureaucracy. And often it is perceived, or it is stated that local governments perceive bureaucracy and the red tape as being a primary hurdle when it comes to actually applying for those supporting frameworks of the national government. What is your take on that, and how do you think these kind of things can be remedied?
Well, I can definitely confirm that we are confronted with the word bureaucracy quite a lot as well. Well, from our part, as we are on the one side of the game, that we're giving money to the project. Of course, we try to keep bureaucracy down as much as possible, and I think we succeed more or less with that. But definitely we need to work on that. But on the other hand, we also need to explain the people that we are dealing with tax money from all the taxes of all the Austrians, and it's very, very important to have criteria how we distribute the money to different projects. Otherwise, we could get in trouble as well with all the authorities we have to report to. But I hear about many stories of the bureaucratic system that is not affecting us, and we are trying with the municipalities together to address these issues. But it's not an easy topic, I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Christoph. Soledad, could I direct the same question at you? How much is the bureaucracy and the red tape being considered as a hurdle for provincial and local levels in actually engaging with the national level in these actions?
Well, I mean, since we established the National Cabinet on Climate Change, this has improved very significantly because having the National Cabinet is placed under the Chief of Staff of the President. So this provides us a leverage in terms of overcoming this sort of problems that is very, very effective. So I would say that is not our main problem right now. The problem the provinces have mostly to do with budget. They may have very good intentions, but they don't necessarily have the financing, and international finance is not easily channeled to the provinces, so and even less so to municipalities. So we are working with the Green Climate Fund in a project for financing at the municipal level to be able to cluster projects and access international finance. But that is, I would say, the main focus of preoccupation down here in the south. Of course we have bureaucracy, but it's not the red tape is not the main problem right now. It's mostly being able to channel the finance effectively, and for those smaller local authorities to be able to access. Of course, the city of Buenos Aires can access international finance because it's very big and has a large budget, but for smaller ones, it's much harder. So that is one of the focus of our work that we want to engage during next year.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps I can, because we don't have too much time left, perhaps I can go a little bit back to a very sort of technical question in this sense. Directed at you, Nuri, there's a question from the audience, and I do realize as well that there is quite some questions from people that are very, very interested in sort of how you are doing this on a daily basis in practice. One question you, Nuri, is the question: if you own the generation, so you have your own renewable energy technologies on the site, but you have to work with a very powerful oligopoly that owns the distribution grid. So is this the case in your case, and how do you work with that, or generally how do you work with these kind of situations?
Yes, of course, our plants are connected to the grid in all of the cases. So yes, as members, we have to pay all the distribution costs in our bills. So in Spain, in the bill, we have a very big, important part, which is the fixed price. And also this is very bad because you pay even you don't use electricity. So this is not an incentive to invest on efficiency, etc. And then you have the variable part, which only a small part is electricity. And the other part is distribution cost, capacity cost, system cost, and we have to pay for all this as the others. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the plants are connected to the grid. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking. So what I would like to do now, actually, is given the fact that we're closing in on the end of the webinar, I would like to ask our three respective speakers if you would like to make a final statement on any of the issues, or also particular with regard to what you've heard from the other speakers. Do you see that, taking this global perspective, that there are very strong commonalities that different national governments and local governments can learn from their respective peers on the international level, and that this, in a general sense, can then lead to a more coherent, also climate change process under the UNFCCC. Perhaps I can go back to you, Christoph. What is your take on the international exchange of expertise, or international exchange of how the dialogue and cooperation with the local and national governments can be stimulated? Yeah.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I wanted to thank you to let me take part in this very interesting discussion here, like the one in Bonn was very, very interesting for me. Of course, I think that this exchange is very, very fruitful. Of course, very much on an expert level, but I would like to point out an aspect that is even more important than the exchange on an expert level. I think the power of inspiration is the thing that works here quite well. When we share ideas from people who are very motivated, inspiring, I saw it with among our regions. Then things really happen quite fast. So much stronger than the technical exchange, I think, is the power of inspiration, when things really work out, shared by people who share a common vision and really fight for their cause. And this can be, quite a powerful source. And I think we have to work together on that to bring those people, those inspiring people and inspiring projects together to share this vision and change the things for the good. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Christoph. Soledad, could I direct the same question at you, specifically because you're also very heavily engaged in actually the international climate negotiation process?
Sorry, can you repeat the questions? I got distracted.
Oh, no problem, of course. The question was, where do you see the most added value of international cooperation between either local or national governments on the international level, when it comes to the exchange of expertise on how this cooperation between the different government levels can actually be pushed forward?
Well, right now, I see that the biggest movement in terms of international climate policy is coming from the local governments. So at the international level, what we see is a stall since the U.S. announcement that they may or may not be leaving the Paris Agreement. So it is a moment where it's very difficult to advance the agenda at the international state-to-state level because of this situation with the second largest emitter. And for that same reason, the movement in terms of the agenda is coming mostly from cities and provinces. And in that sense, I think, well, the existing networks like escalate, like the C40 or C20, all the cities and the provinces that are engaged in networks is increasingly important and useful to move the international agenda. I think I see as a very active cooperation going on right now, so I don't have specific suggestions, but definitely it's where I see the most movement and the most interesting types of cooperation coming along. Of course, there's always the issue of scale, because sometimes cooperations between cities is on quite a small scale, and scalability is important. And it would be important for these sort of initiatives to be able to access larger funds like the Green Climate Fund or others in order to improve their reach. But in terms of specific initiatives, I think that is where the most interesting things are happening. Hi, did you hello?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, that was my microphone, very irresponsible. I'm sorry. No, Nuri, I was actually talking to you about the question about international cooperation in the field of renewable energy cooperatives. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of international cooperation going on. Could you briefly state, just to round things up, what you see sort of the added value of international cooperation, international exchange of expertise in the field of renewable energy cooperatives?
Yeah, in fact, maybe you don't know, but we are in the federation. If the European Cooperative Federation is called RESCOP, and really it's very interesting, because as a cooperative in Europe, in that case, yes, we can act as an important actor, because sometimes it's difficult that the policies, they don't think on the citizens, and it's very important that the government see the citizen in the center of that energy transition. And as a part of that federation, and this federation is doing, in my opinion, we are doing an important job in order to change those policies. So it's very important, and also, yes, we share the knowledge. Yes, it's we have European projects also. We are in Horizon 2020 European projects. All the innovation we can share between us. Yes, intercooperation, it's one of the values of cooperatives. So it's yes, it's in our genes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Nuri. Thank you to all of our distinguished speakers. We very much appreciate you taking the time to speaking here in this webinar again as a follow-up to our forum. Let me just round this up by saying that, being very much attached to what Soledad mentioned, the role of local governments and this increased dialogue and cooperation between the different government levels has become a very dominant factor in the international climate negotiations, as we have seen this year during COP23 and COP. Actually, this forum in which this webinar was based on was actually held during COP23 as part of the climate summit of local and regional leaders, which has been carried by organizations such as escalate, Local Governments for Sustainability, and C40. It is, for me personally, a huge, it gives me great pleasure to see how actively all the stakeholders that are engaged in this process are willing to exchange this expertise and come to Bonn, come to COP23 to engage in this kind of webinars, to engage and to exchange with their peers. So at this point, I would again like to thank our speakers very much for taking the time to be here. I would also like to extend a very warm thank you to all of our participants. And I hope that I was able to integrate your questions, many as they were, as much as possible into the flow of the webinar. And I hope that you have learned as much as you hoped. Myself, I will also remain available. Again, I'm the coordinator of the Global 100% Renewable Energy Platform. I would look forward to engaging again with both the speakers, but also with all of you from the audience in the future, as we are all part of one large, very motivated community. Thank you very much. And with this, I would like to give the microphone back to John. Hello, John. John, can you hear me? Okay, so we're going to do it a little differently. Then I will officially be closing the webinar. So once again, thank you on behalf of Global 100% RE, and I will take the liberty to also thank you on behalf of the International Solar Energy Society for attending this, what I hope was a very successful webinar, and I look forward to engaging with all of you in the near future. Thank you very much.